that we're gathered here today on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Wendat, and Huron people. We also acknowledge many First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and other global Indigenous peoples call Mississauga home, and we are grateful for the opportunity to live and work and share the land with them. We would like to thank our sponsors this morning, Meridian Credit Union and JD Factors. And we're so delighted to have the Minister back. We were just commenting the last time the Minister was here, it was during a very brief window of opportunity during the COVID, the height of COVID really, and the lockdowns we did experience at that time. And to keep that in the rearview mirror for all time going forward. So whether it's boosting the capacity and efficiency of our healthcare system, supporting the broad-based reskilling that's vital for Ontario to not only keep pace, but to lead in industries that will represent an increasing share of economic growth, or supporting the research, innovation, and an entrepreneurial ecosystem free of unnecessary red tape, all things that will lead to increased prosperity for our communities and certainly for Mississauga itself as it becomes a single-tier municipality along with the city of Brampton and the town of Caledon. I know all of these issues are on everyone's minds, particularly those top two issues, I would say, of housing and of our labor challenge right now that we know that many of you continue to face, and I think that despite the efforts of governments and private sector, etc., it's going to be with us for a bit of time, and I think it just behooves us to address it as quickly as we can and as smartly as we can, and we'll hear from the Minister some of his thoughts on that in terms of where the government is headed on those two files. To this end, the Mississauga Board of Trade and the Ontario Chamber Network was pleased to see the following items included in the most recent provincial budget. Further steps to address the labour market challenges by boosting immigration through the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program and removing barriers to foreign credential recognition through the Ontario Bridge Training Program. Creation of additional pathways into healthcare jobs through the expansion of the dual credit program, which will provide secondary students with opportunities to start their careers as nurses, personal support workers, medical laboratory technicians, and paramedics much sooner than previously. Introduction of the Ontario-made manufacturing investment tax credit to support local manufacturing companies in investing and expanding in Ontario, strengthening our provincial supply chains. And there's another one, that we've been dealing with, the whole supply chain issue and how we can better ready ourselves for any future disruptions in that area. Investments in mental health, and I think that we all became more sensitive to the importance of mental health in the workplace particularly, but mental health in general. So additional investment of $425 million over 3 years for mental health and addictions, including a 5% increase in the base funding of community-based mental health and addiction service providers. And we've had a previous session with Minister Tobolo about all of those issues. I would now like to take a little bit of time to introduce our head table, starting with Chris Green, one of our esteemed sponsors today, Regional Vice President with Meridian Credit Union, Christina Kakaflikas, Director of Economic Development for the City of Mississauga, my colleague Brett McDermott, Director of Government and Stakeholder Relations at MBOT, and we have Councillors Brad Butt, Ward 11, and Alvin Tejo, Ward 2. Thank you for joining us today, Councillors. And of course, our honoured guest, the Honourable Peter Bethlenfalvy, Ontario's Minister of Finance. I'd also like to welcome some participating Board of Directors here with us today. Linda Kern, Founder and CEO of the Kern Group, John McKenna with McKenna Logistics Centres. I think Atul here. Atul Sharma is supposed to be here from the Greater Toronto Airports Authority. Amanda Potler, Director of External Relations at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, and Robin Sacon, Director of Public Affairs at BD Canada. I would now like to welcome Chris Green, Regional Vice President with Meridian Credit Union, to say a few words and officially welcome the Minister today. Chris.
Great, good morning, Mississauga Board of Trade. So delighted and honored to be here today and to say a few things about Meridian Credit Union before introducing our Minister. Just want to let you know, Meridian is the second largest credit union in all of Canada, the first largest in Ontario. We have 365,000 members and $28 billion in assets under management. The credit union has grown fairly significantly over the last few years, as you can tell. We have a vision to be a very inclusive, transparent, and people-focused financial partner. 100%, we're 100% member-owned and operate for 75 years in the province of Ontario. We are a provincially licensed credit union. Our vision is to offer full banking platforms for business banking, including cash management, day-to-day banking needs, loans for small business, medium business, all the way through to large corporate. We have our small business team here today and our diversified commercial businesses. We offer wealth management and even deposits for retails, companies, and even maybe provincial deposits, hint, as well. So Meridian has an official path to purpose, that we call it, and our goal is really to help our members achieve their best possible life. Our good for strategy, Meridian Good is our strategy and focuses heavily on environmental, social, and governance and everything that we do at Meridian. It comes through in all of our member interactions and how we decide to support our local communities, and that continues. It's a very strong focus of 2023 and going forward, and this is, and actually the strategy has been passed by our board and will remain in place for many years. At Meridian, we also have what's called the Affinity Program. So any member of the Board of Trade here gets special arrangements in terms of pricing on day-to-day banking. I hope all of you inquire about that and take benefits of that with the cost of the rising costs of everything that we're having today. Maybe we can help lower your banking needs on that front as a member of Mississauga Board of Trade. I'm grateful to be here today to introduce the Ontario Finance Minister, Peter Bethlenfalvy. Peter was elected for MPP in Pickering and Uxbridge in 2018. I know this because I was a voter and I voted for him. And, and I even had the lawner that said, vote for Peter on my front lawn. I was trying to find it last night because I was going to hold it up here just to prove that, but I actually had the lawner on my lawn as well. So always a big supporter of Peter. Re-elected in 22 again. As Minister of Finance, he's responsible for managing the province's finance, building, environment, long-term economic prosperity. You know, throughout COVID-19, the Minister has provided support for Ontario families, workers, and businesses needed through the pandemic. Now with Premier Ford, he's working to get it done for healthcare systems, communities, and the economy again, to ensure that we have stronger than ever before place in Ontario. Peter, prior to entering public service, the Minister served as senior leadership roles for several financial institutions, President and Chief Operating Officers of TD Securities, we've heard of them, Co-President of DBRS as well. So an impressive resume for sure. He has served on the board of directors for many charitable organizations. And in 2014, he joined the True Patriot Love expedition to the Canadian Arctic, which is fantastic to see. It's a place I would love to travel to one day, but it's cheaper to go to Cuba apparently. But I got to get those cost of flights down. In 2014, he joined for the military family. He holds a Bachelor of Science from the Master of Business Administration from McGill University. So with that, please welcome me in joining the Honourable Peter Bethlenfalvy.
Oh, it always makes me nervous when the constituents are here because I really have to be nice, extra nice. Hopefully I'm nice all the time. Thank you for that great introduction. Thank you, Trevor and Chris Chris, and of course to Brad and Alvin for being here. I'm a bit surprised that my very good friend and I thought colleague Bonnie Crombie isn't here. So she may be working on something else. She's taking a leave of absence. And it does harken me back to when she was chair of the Big City Mayors and launched that. And I really value the work that the big city mayors in Mississauga and Peel continue to do, because it's very important to know what the priorities are. And before our budget last year, she said, and with all the big city mayors, and they represent something like 70% of the population of Ontario, the number one, I said, what's your number one priority? If I had to do one thing in the budget, what would it be? And they were great. They said, the number one thing, Minister, you could do was support us for mental health and addiction. Increase the funding, increase the community supports, increase the base rates that were mentioned by Trevor. You know, that's the most impactful thing you could do. I said, great. What's your second priority? And they said, homelessness. We need you to support us because we've got pressure in Peel, we've got pressure in Durham, we've got pressure in Toronto. As a result of this is a great place for people that want to come all over the world. We're a beacon of hope and freedom and democracy. So we delivered there too. We delivered a 20%, 40%, not 20, 40% increase on the base funding for homelessness prevention. And a lot of that money goes to building supportive housing. Because you typically, where you go to the emergency room and you just go through a vicious cycle. Most of the people that are homeless don't want to be homeless, but they need our help. They need our support. And by building supportive housing and then providing the services right there, whatever needs are, mental health, addiction, physiotherapy, job, whatever. And I toured one, and I'll get to my remarks in a second. I toured a treatment facility in Sault Ste. Marie a couple of weeks ago. I think it was 20 beds. People who work there now are former homeless people. Like, they want to help people. They don't want to be homeless. Many don't. And it's up to each one of us, everyone in the room, to acknowledge that and support it and find different ways to help the most vulnerable in society. So that's my memory of Bonnie Crombie. The third was infrastructure, and we're going to talk a little bit about infrastructure. So again, thanks for having me. And Trevor, you mentioned when I was last here, so it's great to be here again. And you know, I think Mississauga is a fantastic place to raise a family. The business community is so thriving here in Mississauga, and it's a real big part of our education system. I spoke earlier with Sheridan College, they're always here. Thank you for your support. 27,000 students now, full-time and part-time. You know, this is happening right across the province in terms of our growth and our education. And by the way, world-class education, right? World-class education right here in Mississauga, all over Ontario, and frankly, that's our brand in Canada. Les gens choisissent Mississauga pour élever leur famille, faire des affaires, faire des études, et commencer leur carrière. Mississauga is a powerhouse within the GTA, making up 22.3% of GTA's employment. That's incredible, 22.3%. You all know that. Between 2020 and 2022, employment within the GTA grew by 341,000 workers. And as Ontario continues to grow, Mississauga will continue to be a destination of choice. Because we all know that Ontario is the fastest growing jurisdiction, not just in Canada, but all of North America. And think about that, how fast some places like Texas and Florida and other parts of the South are growing. We're growing faster than them. And that population that continues to grow rapidly helps us create jobs and provide the labor and includes the investments that we make in Ontario that people that want to come to Ontario. Notre population continue de croître rapidement, des emplois sont créés et nous attirons les bons investissements dans toute la province. You can tell I'm from Montreal, eh? La rive sud, Saint-Lambert. Last year alone, more than 500,000 people came to this great province. 500,000 people. We haven't seen numbers in Canada, in Ontario, since the early 1900s. And you know what? Statistics Canada and others think that maybe we're undercounting the number of people that are coming to Ontario and to Canada. And we feel it in the communities. You can feel that population growth. If we continue on this pace, we're going to add another 5 million people over the next 10 years. That's a good challenge to have. We need more people to fill our jobs and grow this economy. Over 2,100 businesses are operating in Ontario today compared to last year. 2,100, which is nearly half of Canada's overall growth. You know, we're 39% of the population, but often in economics we're over half. In population growth, we're at least half. And so for all of us in this room and beyond, it's going to be all hands on deck to support this unprecedented growth. We must work together to build housing, to build the community infrastructure needed to support those growing communities. And earlier this year, as Trevor mentioned, we delivered our plan for building a strong Ontario with the 2023 budget that supports, as you said, Trevor, supporting businesses and people while laying a strong fiscal foundation for future generations. You know, folks, it's our roadmap for building schools, for building highways, for building roads, building transit, building hospitals, building long-term care, building broadband. That's part of the infrastructure that we have to get built. And as Trevor mentioned, we introduced a new manufacturing tax credit. You know, we have a productivity challenge in this province, and there's not a single bullet, virtually healthcare, economy, infrastructure. You've got to do many things, and focusing on productivity gains and through tax measures and through red tape and through input costs. So there's a whole range, education, technology. But a manufacturing investment tax credit goes a long way to encouraging businesses to reinvest their capital right here in Ontario. So from day one, we've made manufacturing a priority in Ontario. So 1 in 10 paychecks in the GTA now comes from, manufacturing. And our government will continue to support those workers. With that population growth, you got to have the infrastructure. And you got to think down the road, because to actually get things built takes a long time. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to have a vision. You have to have a plan. And that's why I'm very proud to say that we continue to make record investments in infrastructure in the history of not just the province, in the history of Canada. You know, with that 5 million population growth, we're going to surpass New York pretty soon. Whoever thought that Ontario would be the New York of North America? But we need to build a range of things, including highways. You know, one of the things that the 413, you know, building the 413 was so popular, and there's a reason that I know it's popular, because I've been to Brampton. I've driven around Brampton. You can't get from here to there. In Mississauga, coming out here for my riding, you know, moving people, moving goods, we need to have the infrastructure. But we continue to also invest in transit. That's why we continue to support Mississauga in terms of transit and the Hazel-McCallion line, so that we can move people and goods. It's not just roads, it's light rail, it's subways, it's GO trains. Someone said 2-day, all-day GO to Milton. I keep hearing that all the time. You know, we got to keep doing it all. And as we welcome all these people to Ontario. Oh, by the way, I'm the son of 2 World War II refugees. So I know what it's like growing up with parents who had nothing when they came here. Absolutely nothing. They came to Canada with nothing, and Canada gave them everything. So it's incumbent on all of us to continue to invest. Democracy, as John Turner said, doesn't happen by accident. It happens because of hard work and contributing. Every one of you in this room knows that. Whether it's in the economic sphere, the healthcare sphere, the city sphere, in the education sphere. We all have a role to play. And one of those key roles is to build houses. You know, I think about my family. I grew up, I knew 3 great-grandparents who also emigrated from Hungary during World War II, who lived in the same house as my grandparents and my mom and my uncle. 7 people in the same house. You know, and here today, the Minister of Finance is standing before you. That's the Ontario, that's the Canadian dream. But you know what? They're not going to have a dream if they're sleeping on the streets. And let me tell you, I don't want to be standing in front of you in a year or 2 years from now and say that we didn't build houses, we didn't build supportive housing, we didn't build affordable houses, student housing, seniors housing, attainable housing, not-for-profit housing. We got to do it all. And that's why I'm really proud that our government continues to support that effort through things like the Building Faster Fund, so that will encourage cities who meet their targets, that they'll get extra money to help with the costs of developing that infrastructure. I mentioned just briefly the fiscal health of the province. I am a finance guy, having worked in capital markets in New York and Toronto for my whole career. I do know that we've inherited the lowest credit ratings and the highest debt to GDP in the history of the province. And you can't have a prosperous economy and infrastructure fund if you're not taking care of the finances of the province. Now, we went through one heck of a COVID, as Trevor was mentioning, but it's so important that we don't take our eye off the ball of being fiscally responsible. You wouldn't run your households that way, you can't run your businesses that way, you can't run a hospital that way. You need to continue to be stewards of the very precious dollars that we have. And I'm very pleased that 3 of the 4 global credit rating agencies, Moody's, S&P, and DBRS, my old firm, put Ontario for the first time in 2 decades on credit watch for a possible upgrade, credit upgrade, which means lower borrowing costs. Interest costs are still our 4th largest expenditure, over $12 billion, I think. You know, I'd rather spend that. If I'm going to spend $12 billion, I'd rather spend it on a hospital or another subway or another long-term care facility, upgrading our schools, building schools. So that's why it's important. And also, you don't know what's around the corner. You know, imagine if the Premier said to me when COVID hit in March of 2020, which he did say, I want to spare no expense. You got to open up your checkbook. And I said, well, you know, Premier, we can't, because we're fiscally constrained. That's not what the people of Ontario want to hear. They want to make sure that we're prepared for whatever is around the corner. Now, it is tough times. The Bank of Canada, yesterday's inflation rate was not welcome news, 4% on the headline, 3.9%, which is the core, which takes out food and energy. Food inflation came down, but it's still very high. It's too high. So we have a lot of work to do there. So we're not immune from what's happening in the world. We're a small, open economy at the end of the day, 40 million people, and you know, we've got the US beside us, which is a real benefit, but as they go, we go. And Europe, and lots of things going on in China and Asia. So what you have from me is a commitment to continue to manage the fiscal health of the province so we can invest in those core priorities that we have and continue to be a steward of the economy so that we can have economic health and fiscal health at the same time. I will just end by saying it's really important that Mississauga, the region of Peel, is such a key part of that economic engine in Ontario, continues to play its leadership role, not just here in Ontario, frankly, all of Canada. You know, I often say as Ontario goes, Canada goes. I got to say, as Mississauga goes, Ontario goes. So we need you to be with us, and you are, as we navigate these challenging times. So it's through communities like Mississauga, helping us with the critical infrastructure. I might talk in the Q&A, Trevor, a little bit about Trillium and what we're doing for your healthcare here, a little bit on the Hazel-McCallan line, the education system, but I'd love to get to the questions. I thank you for your time and patience, and I look forward to the dialogue in a few minutes. Thank you very much.
One statistic that my colleague Brett, who runs our government affairs, likes to cite, and we borrowed from our partners at the city, is that Mississauga is about 5% of the province's population, but 7% of economic output, making the city of Mississauga a net contributor economically to the province. And this helps fund province-wide priorities that the minister has already touched on, like healthcare and education, and sadly paying down the debt. And while we have a great economic story in Mississauga, we face substantial challenges in a variety of areas that have the potential to limit our optimum output in terms of the economy here. And many industries face labor shortages in terms of transportation infrastructure. We need to continue building mass transit, and we know that's being done with the Hazel-McCallan line, the Dundas BRT, extending Eglinton Crosstown to Pearson Airport is something else that we'd like to see. And you mentioned the two-way all day ago, which I know
I thought I'd get it out there.
we talked about. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that as well. You know, the federal government, I understand, has made that commitment to co-fund that. How will the government of Ontario meet these infrastructure needs of Mississauga and the GTA and the province in the context of labor shortages, in the context of budgetary limitations?
Yeah, great question. You thought long and hard on this question.
Someone did.
Someone did. Great question. Look, one of the things that I always looked at when I was at DBRS is a credit rating agency. It's now global, and I always looked at the deficits of provinces. And if you look at the history since 1867, a lot of the $400 billion of debt we have is to fund deficits. And I always thought it's much better if you fund infrastructure, because you're funding real assets, and real assets help people. Hospitals, roads, bridges, you name it, sewage, broadband. And we've had historic low interest rates, and I love the people who say, this is the worst economy, we've never seen interest rates this high, this is terrible. Oh boy. I was around in the 80s when, interest rates got, over 12%. Inflation got to 20%. And the economy, the job losses were massive. But my point is this, that when you invest in infrastructure and borrow at relatively low rates, you're investing in long-term assets, real assets. And it's so critical that if you're going to have the population growth, you got to think ahead down the road. It's one thing, we talk about the housing crisis, and I'll talk about that in a second. But schools, where are they going to go to schools? So all these 500,000 people that came to Ontario, by the way, the number's probably more like 800,000. That's a wartime effort to build infrastructure right now. You got to get it done. You have to have a vision, and you don't build a school overnight. So my point is that investing in infrastructure, $184 billion is our capital plan. I still think that's not enough. We got to grow, and I think that's up by tens of billions since we came into government. The second part of the question, Trevor, is really, well, it's great to have, you've got a plan to build a hospital, Trillium, or Hazel County. Who's going to do that? Because if you just look around in the skilled trades, there's about 140 skilled trades. The average age of just about every skilled trade is in their 50s. We've got a massive retirement thing happening. It's not just happening in skilled trades, it's happening in healthcare, it's happening right across the board. And that's why it's so important that and I think we'll get to this in the next segment on the labor shortage. We have to have a vision. You just can't wake up one night and say, hey, we don't have enough millwrights, we don't have enough boilermakers, we don't have enough welders. You have to have a plan. So I'll expand on that. But building, you have to have a vision. We have a vision right across, whether it's healthcare, schools, broadband, roads, bridges, public transit, nuclear. The cost of nuclear is going to be massive, but it is the way forward. Cheap, low cost, green. I said cheap. Low cost, green, good jobs, Ontario skills to power that green economy. And by the way, Ontario is one of the leading jurisdictions on the planet for a green economy. One of the leading jurisdictions, and I'll get into that as well.
Sure, and just to follow up on that, can you talk a little bit about what those strategic investments mean when it comes to Minister Fedeli and the Premier going out to sell the province, to companies looking to invest here?
Yeah, good question. Let's take Volkswagen. Volkswagen has never invested in Canada before, never. And they're building a 16 million square foot facility in St. Thomas. Has anyone been in a 1 million square foot facility? I mean, that's gigantic. 16 million, I can't get my head around that. The building is 1.6 kilometers long, 1 kilometer wide. And so I think jogging around, that's a 5.2K run. It's just one circuit. That's incredible. 30,000 direct and indirect jobs. So what's attracting Volkswagen here? First of all, talent. We talk about Sheridan here. Right across Ontario, colleges and universities, the skilled trades, the apprenticeship program. I'd put that up against any other jurisdiction in the world. Number two, you know, the ESG, environmental social governance, which we are the largest issuer of green bonds in Canada. In fact, we're more than every province plus Ottawa combined in issuing green bonds. Those funds that we raise on green bonds then go to green projects. So we have more green projects than anywhere in North America, anywhere. But you got to think down the road a little bit, because in 10 years this is going to be even more important. By the way, when you issue green bonds, my borrowing costs actually go lower because there's a premium. It's called a greenium that you get when you issue green bonds. We've done $15 billion worth of green bonds. So they look at that and they say, you know, your footprint, which is virtually carbon free. You know, sometimes you hear about the gas that we're, by the way, Germany would love to have that gas. They see that as a clean versus they're 24% coal. We're 0% coal. Japan, an industrial, machine, 33% coal in Japan. In the US, a third of the states, their number one energy source is coal. Ontario, squadouche. That's a technical finance term. Squadouche. And that's in the electricity generation grid. You know, what we're doing is going further into the private sector. So just down the road in Hamilton, working with the FASCO to convert their coal furnace to make steel that'll go into those cars and all the buildings that we're building with electricity that's powered by green electricity. That's 1 million cars off the road just on the FASCO plant. So when Volkswagen and companies look like that, they say, geez, you know, we're looking pretty good next to, you know, other places in the US that they could locate in. People who are offering them tax breaks, like up to the wazoo, you know, saying we are world beating here in Ontario.
Well, yeah, and that's another part of it too, is that balance between incentives and race to the bottom, right? When it comes to attracting investments.
Yeah, you know, the other thing is we've got auto talent here, you know, and we've seen a hollowing out of our manufacturing sector. You know, what Germany is good at is the manufacturing sector. What Japan is good at is the manufacturing sector. And you know what Ontario is good at? The manufacturing sector. And it's not just that, it's advanced manufacturing. It's like, you've been to all these businesses. I mean, it's not just, right now it's technology is a huge core of that. So we now are the largest jurisdiction in North America for technology. We've surpassed Silicon Valley. Ontario is bigger than Silicon Valley. We have over 400,000 people employed in the tech space. I see it happening. I work in Frost, which is right across, it's a building right across from Queen's Park. We used to have a nice view over the Mars Institute and, you know, so, well, no longer, because the building's gone up right beside us. Completely dedicated to artificial intelligence research and data. There's something powerful happening in Ontario. It's marrying the skilled trades, the technology, the manufacturing sector, the green economy. It's all these things. I like our chances.
That's great. Thank you very much for that additional insight. And I'm going to look for that word squadouche in the fall economic statement.
I learned that in New York. That comes from my New York.
And certainly, you mentioned AI and sort of the role of technology. Just a little plug here for us. In November, we're working with a bunch of partners, including the Vector Institute.
Let's embarrass Brad. Thanks for coming, Brad.
Yeah.
Tried to sneak out. I love that. And Alvin too. Okay. Thanks for being here.
But we're working with Vector and some others and putting together a half-day session in November on AI. So they say that this is going to have a larger impact than when the internet itself came to fruition. Another one of the challenges facing Mississauga and communities across Canada is the housing crisis we've mentioned. The situation is particularly acute locally in multiple ways. The problem ranges from international students struggling to find housing that is affordable to local and to our local corporations struggling to attract talent because the cost of purchasing a home is in many cases out of reach. Clearly, there are no easy solutions for the housing crisis, another challenge that has been in the making for a good while. In the context of the debate surrounding development charges, the Premier has spoken about keeping municipalities whole, and maybe it's it's timely that our councillors have left the room.
Sorry, Brad.
Can you elaborate on how development charges help or hinder the increase of the housing supply. And can you elaborate on how municipalities can be kept whole? And one little piece that I'll add to this is, we saw in the news that Mayor Chow of Toronto was with the Premier, and they've agreed to form a working group to really look at potential solutions for Toronto's fiscal challenges. Is this something that could open the door for looking at how municipalities in the province in general are funded?
Okay, Trevor, there was a lot of questions in that question. Listen, two things keep me up at night. Our housing shortage and the Blue Jays. You gotta have
Still the wild card spot, right?
You gotta have a strong heart to watch those folks, but go Blue Jays. Look, the first thing to really acknowledge is this: when we say housing crisis, what does that mean? That means like we really do have a shortage of housing that is putting a burden, whether it's the house, buying a new apartment, the refinancing of your mortgage, the increases in rent. This is real. The population growth, like this is like we're in a war footing here to get houses built, and we need all hands on, as I said in my remarks, we need all hands on deck to get that done. And it's not either or. It's all kinds of housing, so from student housing to senior housing to attainable housing to not-for-profit housing to condos, small condos, large condos, front door, back door, wherever. And we can't do it alone in the province. We need the municipalities who have in a lot of ways the keys to unlocking that. So we've got targets, and the good news is that all the big city mayors, I think virtually all of them, maybe there's one exception somewhere, that have agreed to all those targets. That they're on board. We're in lockstep on that. A couple of things on the keep whole. That's a big word, but a term. But the reality is that the development charges, what we're really talking about, folks, just to be crystal clear, is on the attainable, affordable piece. So waiving development charges helps encourage the development of those attainable homes, or condos, or student housing, or senior housing, or whatever. In part to mitigate that, we've launched the Building Faster Fund that we announced at the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, $1.2 billion. That will be a lot of the funding that goes to offset and help municipalities to attain those targets. Another one is, a year ago, and I know you all follow me on Twitter and Facebook, so you know this really well. We a year ago said that we wanted Ottawa to rebate or defer the HST on purpose-built rental. We don't build enough rental stock in this province. We hit the highest number of rental stock building last year since 1987. So for 35 years, we've been scraping the bottom. This waiving of the HST, I reiterated in Budget 2023, which I'm sure you've all read, on page 83, where I said I called on the federal government to do this. They made a campaign commitment in 2015. We said, Ontario is there. Do it. We're there. But you hold the keys, not us. And that's what they announced at their caucus. So I have to leave right after this because I'm going to my caucus, where I'll be briefing caucus. So waiving that HST is going to, we've heard from stakeholders right across the province, is going to incent a real big funding of encouragement for developers to build that rental stock. The state can't build everything. So there are many tools that will get us to our housing targets and beyond, and we have to do it together.
Great. And while we're on tax policy, are you comfortable with current tax policy as it pertains to business tax? I know you had in previous budgets, made some changes to help small business tax rates and that sort of thing. Where do you think we are on our competitiveness as it relates to business tax?
I'm with the Conservative Party. Look, I mean, inflation is really a challenge right now, and if you want to fiscally, monetary policy, that's Ottawa, that's the Bank of Canada, they've got their issues, but fiscally, what can you do? If you want to stoke inflation, raise taxes and cut spending or increase spending, and I don't think either makes sense right now. People are hurting on the tax side. Businesses, you're talking about businesses, but right across the board, people are hurting because their wages aren't going up as fast as food prices and gas prices and a whole bunch of other things. So my preference is to always focus on keeping taxes or reducing them. And we have the lowest individual and family tax payment for people making up to $50,000 in the country. So we're really helping those who need relief the most. We've helped at the gas pumps. We've helped the most vulnerable are people on guaranteed annual, just the seniors guaranteed annual income. We've indexed for the first time ever to inflation. Ontario disability, for all those on disability, we've indexed to inflation. In fact, we increased it by 5, and then the indexing in July, I think, was 6%, so 11% increase to help those out. The minimum wage, I believe, I'm looking for one of my staffers, I think goes up on October 1st to $16.55. That's going to help lower income. So that's on the tax side. On the spending side, we've got to show restraint because we're in an environment where, first of all, we don't want to stoke inflation by unnecessarily increasing spending, but we have to be mindful of the fiscal situation we're in and the economic uncertainty that we're in.
That's great. We're coming to a close here, and I just want to slip in one other question as it relates to relationships and collaboration with the federal government. We've seen in some cases, you mentioned the removal of the HST from purpose-built rental housing to immigration in recent months, where we've come to some alignment, the province and the federal government. Are there other areas that you can see, some nice sort of examples of collaboration happening that will address some of these challenges that we face?
If you leave today and you have one thing in your head that you leave with is we've got to build. We've got to keep building things. The transit, the Hazel McCallion line, the Trillium Hospital, the long-term care facility right beside it. We've got to keep building. We've got to do infrastructure. Water, sewage, broadband, you name it. And the province has led in all these categories. But as I said about housing, it's not just the province. You need the municipalities and you need the federal government. So the message I would just leave all of you today is to continue to support pushing all levels of government to focus on building things, infrastructure, making sure that we continue to fund that. We need the federal government as a partner. By the way, they have a AAA rating. They have the lowest debt to GDP. I know that because the Minister of Finance tells me all the time, and she tells her G20 partners that all the time. We have the lowest credit ratings in the history of the province. We have the highest debt to GDP in the history of the province. At least it peaked in COVID and it's coming down, but we inherited the highest ever. We've got to work together. I don't think Canadians want us to say it's the municipality. Olivia Chow, you asked about, I didn't answer your question on Olivia Chow, by the way. But Olivia Chow's heading up to Ottawa. We should support Olivia Chow. We should support, Bonnie Crombie when she was mayor. We should support all the municipalities as they go to Ottawa, every provincial MPP, and we got to support working together. Because one thing COVID taught us is when we work together, wouldn't you all agree we can get things done? And that's the environment. It's not a health crisis that we're in. We're in an economic infrastructure housing crisis right now.
Wonderful. And I think when we get those things done, I have a table over here that would appreciate if we celebrate that with a glass of Ontario-produced wine.
I see Del led the applause.
So with that, thank you, Minister, and I'd like to call upon Tina Capobianco, Vice President from JD Factors, to officially thank you.
Thank you, Trevor, and thank you, Minister Bethlenfalvy. It's very comforting and refreshing to know that we have a government right now in power that is interested in building not just for now, but for the future, because it is the way really forward for our economy and just Ontarians in general. So thank you very much. JD Factors has been helping businesses for the last 30 years, and in good times we do very well, and in tough times we do even better because people need cash flow, people need credit advice, And all around, we're here to support small business, medium business, and with the help of organizations like Mississauga Board of Trade and all the government incentives we find out there, hope that will make our economy more prosperous together. So thank you, everyone.